All right, so we went over surfacing in the flat position. We went over a fillet weld in the horizontal position. Now we're gonna get into some vertical fillet welds. All right, so I have a couple pieces tacked up. Let me get these out of the way. All right, so you'll notice it looks just like our T-joint that we welded in the horizontal position, but it's rotated now so that way our weld is going up and down. All right, so it's gonna be kind of similar to our horizontal, some minor changes, and those changes we're gonna find in our angles. So if we kind of start with our work angle, again, if we're looking at the top of our T-joint, you notice there's a 90-degree angle. So with our work angle, we're gonna wanna come in, again, at a 45, so we're gonna wanna split that 90 in half. We don't wanna focus the electrode more onto one plate than the other, because then that's gonna lead to some negative effects in our weld. We wanna make sure that the weld is balanced between the two plates. And then as far as our travel angle, we're gonna kinda wanna angle up. Not too far to where we're pointing straight up at the sky, but again, a 10 to 15 degree angling up. Because when we're welding vertical, gravity is starting to fight against us now. So if we don't check our angles correctly, gravity is going to want to pull that molten metal out of the weld puddle, and your weld's going to look pretty droopy, and you're not really going to be able to correctly fuse these two pieces together. All right, so before we get into our vertical welding, let's take a step over to our welding machine really quick. There's one thing that we need to kind of talk about. So you might notice that I've lowered the wire feed speed on our machine. If we were to keep it at 200, like when we were doing the horizontal welds, that's simply putting a little too much heat into our weld. So our weld pool is gonna be really fluid, and it's just gonna give gravity another opportunity to pull it out of the weld puddle and again, give us a not so sound of a weld. So I've dropped the wire feed speed a little bit, and then we can come back over to our fit up, our T-joint. So if we remember our work angle, all right, we can just come right in, split this 90 in half. All right, we don't want to focus on one plate more than the other. All right, just kind of balance that weld as much as we can on both plates. And then we're going to angle upward just slightly so that way we can counteract gravity wanting to pull out that weld on us. All right, then you can go ahead and do a couple dry runs. Make sure that you're nice and comfortable. And when we're going up, vertical up on these welds, we're going to start utilizing what we call a Z weave. So it's almost like you're just drawing the letter Z, constantly going up. And we don't want to travel upwards too far up. We want to make sure that the weld we're depositing slightly overlaps the weld that we had just put down before. So we want to make sure that there's constant overlap in our weld, and we want to pause on the toes. So essentially, you can kind of count it out like 1 1,000, 1 1,000, 1 1,000, 1 1,000. So we're only hanging out in the middle just long enough to bring the weld pool over with us. All right. And so what I did once I got to the top, again, we don't want there to be too big of a crater. So we want to take the time, pause a little bit, allow more filler material to fill in that crater, okay? And so if we kind of think about heat rising, by the time we get to the top, that material is going to be really hot. And so instead of filling in the weld, that weld pool is going to want to penetrate even further through our material. So if we think about how we can control the heat just with our stick out, if we increase the stick out of our electrode, it kind of cools down the weld with GMAW, and so the closer we get, the hotter our weld is. So by the time you get to the top, if you just kind of increase your stick out, it'll allow you to fill in that weld versus blowing all the way through. And that right there is a fillet weld in the vertical position.